when you open Illustrator, make a new document. And on, you know, if you do have like a square or something that's not a traditional like proportions or size for an invitation, just look online, like what is the proportion of that invitation if you used one as an example. But for now, I'm going to do 5 for the width by 7 and just make sure this is in inches. If you're doing horizontal, you know, you can switch to horizontal. Okay, and I'm just going to click create. Now, you are going to make sure you have even margins. So this is maybe something that we haven't done a whole lot, but you don't want your text to go right to the edge of the page. So when you open a document, can I have everyone actually, why don't you guys open up Illustrator right now and create a new 5 by 7 and just work along with me for a minute. That way, when you come back later to do this, you're not like, wait, what did she say? So everyone open Illustrator and go to File and New and create a 5 by 7. And if you have to change the size later, you can always create a new document then. But I just want you to do this with me so that you remember and it's fresh in your mind. So you can take your rough if you want to, and you could put it right on the side here if you need to use it as a reference. Sometimes I go to File and I place like one of my drawings right on my artboard. So I didn't send myself one, but I'm going to do that. So open your 5 by 7. I'm going to email myself. I took a picture of my sketches. It's always a pain in the butt, but it's pretty quick to email yourself a picture. Okay, so I'm going to send that. You can also just have your page next to you. But remember, in Illustrator, you have like all this room around your page that you can use, you know, to design on and then drag things onto your page as needed. But sometimes I like to like pull my color palette and stuff along the side here. So I'm going to go to File and I'm going to go to Place. And I'm going to have my color palette there. You can always change up the color later. It's not that big a deal, but I'm just going to show you how I usually work here. So did I save my color palette? I really love this color palette. I'm going to grab this. You could even do this so that if this is my example that I'm kind of following for one of these, you could use, if you like the color palette of this one, what you can do is grab your little eyedropper tool and you can just start saving some of these colors. I'm going to hover here. And you could even make a folder. You could say this, I don't know, invitation. And I can start throwing them in here. Come on, sometimes you just have to drag it to just the right spot. Love that cream color. So, or you could just have one of those color palettes and sample them and pull them into there. Okay, that's really, I think, the only colors. It's like 3 colors. So really simple. In the design world too, a project with less colors is cheaper to print. So sometimes people purposely limit their color palettes. Hold on one sec. I'm going to hop over. Let me take my share screen off so I can download my picture. Did everyone, were you guys able to open a document? Okay, 5 by 7. I just don't want to share my email with everyone in case there's private info, but I just emailed myself my sketch. Okay. So you can just leave your sketch next to you and look at it, but you're using your rough to kind of design off of. You've already done most of the hard design work because you've laid out all your text. So I'm going to File and Place and grab out of my downloads that sketch that I made. I could go ahead and like crop this in Photoshop or whatever, but these are the 2 that I came up with. So if I want to just keep it here, I can. Sometimes if it's really precisely drawn, I'll like stretch it and put it in the background and then actually use it as my guide to lay things out. But for text, it's not, I think I could just leave it off to the side. Okay, so there's my designs. All right, so you can just leave things around your artboard as you need to, inspiration and things like that. Okay, but what I want you guys to do is once your document's open, Control R. Control R will show you measurements. And this is where if you click up here on the ruler itself, or if you right click, I'm sorry, on the ruler, it'll say inches. Make sure it's on inches. That's really important. If not, just go to File and New and open a new one. So I'm going to zoom into this. This is where you guys, you want to make sure you have really even margins. And I'm going to look at this one even. If I were using this as an example, like they have pretty wide margins on one side and narrower on the top. You know, this one's a pretty, if I'm going to base it off of this looks like it's about a 1/4 inch margin. I'm going to put that all the way around my page. So I'm going to click and drag on the ruler, and I'm going to look, this is a 1/4 inch here. And you can just eyeball it, but whatever tick you go to on the ruler, go to it on each side. So I'm going to go over here and drag this one. And it would be there. And then from the top ruler, you can go down and drag out these guides. So just make an even margin all the way around. So you're measuring, you're using math skills. Now, if this is my centered design, for your centered design, you need to put a line straight down the center. You know, you can always format a paragraph to be centered, but really you need to measure because you're going to do lines individually here. So you really do need to have like, where is my center mark? So if this is a 5 inch width, my center is going to be at 2.5, right? So I'm going to grab that and I'm going to put a line at the center. Now these guides, they're invisible. They're not going to actually show up in your design. So I think for either of them, I would just drag out even margins and put a center on even the aligned one, you know, just for the heck of it. Now with these guides, if you go up to view, you can click different things like it's the smart guides are on right now. Rulers you can turn on here as well. Under guides at the bottom, you can like lock your guides if you don't want to move them. You can hide your guides. You can clear the guides. So at the very bottom, there's a guides area that you can do that. The other thing I want to show you, which is really helpful for aligning things, is you can turn on a grid. So if you really want to get specific here, if we go down here, I had to push the down arrow. I'm under view right now. I'm going to show grid. So now it breaks up your page into little tiny squares so you can really start to align things. If you don't like that, you just go back up to view and you can hide your grid. Generally, I just use my guides to kind of align things, but the grid is really helpful if you like want to make your lines evenly spaced apart and things like that. So view, show grid. Okay, so now you're kind of ready to start. So when you're starting, you're going to take your type tool and you're not going to like click and drag out a big text box. This is the difference between the type tool with a text box and without a text box. So if I take the type tool and I just click, it's going to put some random lorem ipsum. It's just like a filler text in there. I can go to character and change the font. I usually go up to type and I go to font here. I can go to recent fonts if I need to right here. I don't know why my computer is so slow with fonts. Hopefully yours is not. My students have been complaining about Photoshop crashing. I know Illustrator takes even more memory. So you guys want to get in the habit of like saving often. So I might even save this after I get my page set up. Okay, so I have to pick out a very simple font. And I have to use what's on in Illustrator. Before, in our previous classes, we might have downloaded from DaFont. If you're using your own computer, you can definitely do that. But we're kind of limited because of these computer restrictions. Like we can't download or install anything. So, okay, so I'm going to choose Jill. I'm going to write Jill. And then actually, I'm going to write John in its own. Oops. If I double click on this, it'll highlight it and then I can, where did it go? Oh, I must have hit a key command. Try that again, John. Okay, now if I type things individually, if I just click and start typing, then it creates this box that I can hold shift, you know, and start dragging things out. With type, if you want something to be, if you just drag out John, say, and I just made it a random size. If I want this to be the exact same size, you can click on Jill and you can use your eyedropper tool and click on this and it will sample that size. It'll change the font and everything. So that's kind of cool. Oh, that's a cool ampersand there. So if I'm looking at this design over here, I'm just going to kind of type these lines separately. I have some white space up there. So like you could first start to lay out your page. Like, okay, I want like a thicker margin. I'm actually going to have the top and bottom margin be like, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch. No, I want it to be an inch because I wanted like John and Jill to kind of be on the 1/3 line. This is where you could even like drag out your rule of thirds guide, you know. If you place this guide in the wrong spot, you should be able to hover over it and move it. If you can't move it, you might have to unlock your guides under view. Okay, so I am going to be really precise about this, trying to stay within the margins. And I'm just going to kind of play with aligning these. So this font doesn't lend well to having those J's overlap, but I mean, it's okay. I'm going to just see how this looks. So kind of like fitting these together, organizing them so they're legible, but maybe they create like an interesting design. So maybe those J's are framing this. Do I want to overlap them? I kind of like how those are overlapped. So really, really paying attention here. I might want a little more negative space. Remember, shift if you're scaling down and you don't want things to get distorted. Okay, so I would play with that. And then for these, I'm going to type and maybe do up here. I could do join us for the wedding of, but I want to now keep the same font for all of this information. I'm just putting John and Jill in that fancy script. Okay, so then I would go in and like maybe click down here. I'm going to have to bring down the size. Remember the character window? Mine like is being funky. It was being funky when I showed you before. This has the font size and style as well. Since that's being funky, I can also go up here and go to fonts. And now I'm just going to pick a very, I don't know if I want, maybe if this were a wedding, maybe I would want something like that. Let's see here. I feel like my little, there's usually more up here. Up here, let's see if there's a better, look at under Essentials Classic. That's what I usually have it on. Let's see what Typography does. These are different workspaces. Does that change my menu at all? No, it doesn't. It gives you different options over here. So here's the character panel over here. That's kind of nice. So if I go to window and I go to character, well, maybe that's not an option here. Well, I changed this to typography and I found this stuff here. Paragraph, character. This has all the kerning and tracking and then leading and things like that too. Okay, so here I can really easily change the size. 119 is fairly large. So remember I said you could like 12 is pretty basic. So little is fine. And then I would type something like, okay, January 15th, 2021. Now, if I want to use this one, maybe, okay, if I'm looking at this right here. I want to keep it aligned and even margin. I can decide to move my margin, and if I want, maybe for this one, I want to make this one bold. And like in here, this is where you make it bold. Now, this doesn't have a bold. Certain fonts do and certain ones do not. So one trick, if you don't have a font that, if you chose a font that doesn't have a bold and you want to make it bold, you can try adding a stroke or an outline. And if it's too thick, you can turn down. So that made it nice and bold with a 0.25 outline on it. So that could be there, and I'm at 12. So I want to pay attention to my sizing because I don't want a ton of different sizes. If you wanted to emphasize the date a bit more, you could maybe make it a, you know, a little bigger than the rest. But now all my other stuff, so guys, these were just, when I clicked and typed, I was able to just type it. I can like go in here and like move it now and make it larger manually, which is nice. But if I do a text box, the text box we haven't used a whole lot. Look at, I'm using my grid to kind of line it up. If you do a text box, it'll only allow you to type kind of in paragraph form. Now that might be okay for certain areas you want to group together. So if I said, the Wren, oh, I don't know what I just typed, the Wren Sen, I was going to say, the Wren Sen. Enter. And now I hit enter here. So this is the difference. And some invitations like to spell things out to make it more formal, things like that. So if I'm using a text box and I actually clicked and dragged out the box, my text is not going to go beyond the box. And that could be a problem if you need it to go. You might have to go back and adjust the size if you have some longer text and it ends up going to the other line. But when I go and adjust the size, notice it's just adjusting the size of the text box. It's not adjusting the size of the letters. So generally in the past, we've always just clicked and typed. That way you can go to your arrow tool and make the size different. If you drag a text box, it's going to look at it like it's a paragraph. So I can go and like left justify everything really easily to this text box, which could be helpful if you want everything really aligned, and this stuff is all going to be pretty small anyway. Sometimes like I like to do periods even for invitations. Like, I don't know, it's just like a fancy way. There's just different things people do for that. So like, since this is all in a text box, like I can go to the paragraph here and I can like center it. I can left justify it. If I highlight it all, I can right justify it. So it's up to you what you want to do with that. If you drag the text box out, so it was between this, dragging a text box, or just clicking and typing. When you drag a text box, it kind of thinks of it as a paragraph. So if you're doing a text box, you can use these functions. If you're not doing a text box, then you have to just like manually center it. So it might be really helpful, like to use a text box. If you are doing the center one, you could type some of the things in a text box, and then you could go to paragraph and center it. Now you could drag this text box out so it's exactly the size of the page, so it'll actually put it right in the center. And then if you type them individually, you'll just have to kind of eyeball it. Use your grids. Like if I look at the grid here, this is coming to this grid, but it's, you know, it's going past, so it's not quite centered. I use my arrows on my keyboard to just nudge things sometimes too. So my centered version, you know, with the centered one, maybe I don't want things to be the same length either. It starts to get a little bit like too blocky. You could purposely then make this a little bigger. So you want to look at the space, you know, like how it's filling the space. I think that's really important. So characters here, when I'm in typography, it's also there. You can also change stuff up here. So maybe for this one, I do want the date to be really large. I'm kind of weird too. Like I like to make my my points even numbers, and that's just like a weird OCD thing. So sometimes I like to like use a size 18 and then a size 12, and then, you know, just to kind of make them work. And guys, if for color in the end, so I'm just designing in black and white first. In the end, what you can do is, let's go to layers. In your layers, this is all on one layer right now. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to put all my text when I'm done on this layer. So I'm just doing all my text in one layer. And if you double click on this, you can say text. Okay, I'm going to lock that so I don't mess with it. And then I can add a new layer and I can drag my layers around, put that behind it. And then I can go in and I can cover this. And remember with this, you can double click on this. Come on. Oh, I'm sorry. You click on it, you double click on the board. And I could write like 5 by 7 exactly. Like if you're being very precise, it's kind of nice to be precise. And then I could align it if I wanted to. Align to the artboard, just like we did like with the pattern. Okay, and then it's just black, so it's showing, it's hard to see, but right here, if I go back to my swatches, so my swatches aren't here anymore because I changed to typography, but I can go to window and go down to swatches, or I can go back up here to Essentials Classic and it should pop up. My swatches should be there. There they are. And look at, I had made these already. So I can go in now. I'm going to turn off the black outline. And I'm going to draw some decorative elements too. But look at already, like this is going to start looking way more polished. So I can go in and use some of these colors. You can add little like banners too. You know, maybe you've seen some that you like. This is really going to highlight the text if I go in and I, oops, just make sure it's on the fill. And then maybe I unlock this and go to my arrow tool and like change the colors. Well, maybe I'll use this. I want to make sure I change this one too. And look at it up here, it should. And you know, you want to make sure it's centered right in there. Just be really meticulous about aligning things, centering things, organizing your stuff. And I think I would change all of these. I really love this whole layout. So maybe I would change all of these to like different colors. I'm going to turn off the stroke. I keep going in the stroke. I'm going to go up here and do it instead. So you'll just go through and just really make it look nice and harmonized and unified. This is not good. I'm not saying like I would add more information, obviously. I'm just for demo purposes. And then maybe I'll do like a floral design or something here and here. Maybe I just, you know, have some things maybe that's sitting on the line. Ooh, I kind of like that. So I'm always nudging things, but make sure you're paying attention to the center, paying attention to your margins. Don't design over the edge of your margins. Keep that clear. Like you can have the banner going off of it. This is like very centered. Remember with composition, not to cut the composition in half. So like there's little things like that. Now I'm looking at this. I think this would look better if I shifted it and put this line like on the 1/3 line. Little compositional things like that. So your design's going to change because my font changed from what I originally thought. Like, so things are going to change up, but I still have these things as my guide. But, you know, I'm shifting them and changing them along the way. Yeah, I definitely like this line, not cutting the page directly in half. Okay, so I think you guys get the gist, right? Save often, like I said, because these computers crash. So I'm going to go in and file, save as, save it as an Illustrator file for now, so you can go back in and work on it. So invitation center Monica. And I'm going to put it in my folder for graphic design. And all that stuff's just there for you to work. Now, when you're completely done, remember you can export it as a PNG. Check that use artboards, because otherwise it'll save it with all this stuff around it. You know, you only want to save what's on the page.